year's theme is online space, access to information, and capturing social realities. And this particular Zoom event has been put together to commemorate the 2023 International Day for Universal Access to Information. It's a day that's set aside by UNESCO, that's the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. And what we're hoping to do with this year's event is to develop the capacity of visual journalists and help them implement satirical, investigative, and humorous cartoons. This Visual Reality Summit is an initiative of the Center which started in 2016. The project also helps these journalists who partake to understand and apply the knowledge of various social media tools to better engage on the issues that their work addresses. Our panelists will discuss how photographers, videographers, and cartoonists can address challenges and leverage the opportunities that the digital space offers. And the hope is that these opportunities will be used in capturing and sharing social realities at scale. Now, we do hope that through insights that are provided by our conversation today, stakeholders can be better equipped at telling compelling and impactful stories. Without further ado, my name is Nabila Usman. I'm a broadcast journalist with Radio Now, 95.3 FM in Lagos, and I'll be your host for today. It's a pleasure to be here if I haven't said so already. Before we proceed, I'd like to introduce our panelists, starting off with Nellie Atting. Nellie Atting is a freelance photographer and a doctoral student at Cardiff University in Wales. And I can see that Ms. Atting has her video on. She's beaming a smile into the camera. So just a wave, you can unmute your mic and say hello very quickly so that we know that it's you for sure.
Hi.
Fantastic.
Quite excited that my dad is here as well. That's all.
Yes, I saw another Atting and I thought, okay, this is an interesting duo. But it's a pleasure to have both of you on. Also on the panel today is Godwin Nwachukwu. Godwin Nwachukwu is a professional cameraman with TVC Communications. Mr. Nwachukwu, can we see what should be your lovely face this morning? Okay, so we're
good
just
morning.
waiting.
Good morning.
Good morning. Fantastic. All right, so we've got you on. Next up on our list of panelists is Mr. Sodiq Adelakun. Mr. Adelakun is a multi-award-winning visual journalist with Punch newspapers. If you can unmute your mic, wave a little hello to us so we know you're here.
Hello, everyone. Point of correction, I think it's not Punch, it's Channels TV.
Channels Television. Well, thank you very much for the correction. My apologies.
Thank you.
All right. So we also have here Mr. Mustafa Bulama. Mr. Bulama is a self-taught political cartoonist. He works with Daily Trust newspaper. Hello, Mr. Bulama. Can you hear us? Can you wave at us?
I can hear you. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. It's good to have you on. And still on the list, we've got Titilope Fadare. Ms. Fadare is a media practitioner with Premium Times, and she also happens to be a 2021 Report Women Fellow of the Wole Soyinka Center for Investigative Journalism. Hello, Ms. Fadare.
Hi, Nabila. Hi, everyone. Good to be here.
Hi, it's good to have you on. And last but not the least, we've got Mr. Kolawole Oluwadare. Mr. Oluwadare is Deputy Director of the Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project. We all know them more commonly as SERAP. Hello, Mr. Oluwadare.
Morning all. I'm sorry my smile may not be as bright as Nelly's, given how much I bought fuel this morning. But good morning also.
That's fine. We can work with what you've got. Right, so I want to say thank you again for joining us and to remind you to please use our hashtags, there are 3 of them, hashtag access to info day, hashtag right to know, and hashtag VR Media Summit. And, you know, I want to take a moment to urge us all that this conversation continues beyond this Zoom meeting. So I'm hoping that we will engage with the theme on across all social media platforms. Now, as we get underway, I want to I've got the pleasure of inviting Samson Ademola. He is Program and Research Officer at the Wole Soyinka Center for Investigative Journalism, and he joins us now to give the opening remarks. Mr. Ademola, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
You've got the floor.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Nabila. I'm stepping in for Muturayo Alaka, the Executive Director, CEO of the Wole Soyinka Center for Investigative Journalism, to welcome everyone, particularly to acknowledge the presence of all the panelists today who have joined this meeting, have prioritized it. I do know that all of them are very, very busy people. And for us, it's a privilege to have you join this Visual Realities Media Summit to mark the 2023 International Day for Universal Access to Information, which we are marking with support from the MacArthur Foundation. Now, just a bit of a background, the WSCIJ launched the Visual Realities initiative in 2016, and it was to the end that we will be able to develop the capacity of visual journalists to implement satirical, investigative, and humorous cartoons. And we have since used that platform, which was launched in 2016, to also develop the capacity of photojournalists to develop compelling and investigative stories. For this Visual Realities Media Summit, let me talk about the problematic of it. That's what actually in part have informed why we are holding this. So over the years, our experience with the Wole Soyinka Award for Investigative Reporting, which began some 18 years ago, have been that we usually have photojournalists, cartoonists submit their entries, but like in trickles compared to others. So I'm going to zoom in to talk about the last 5 years, what the experience have been. For example, in the last 5 years, we've had 888 entries received for the award. And of the 888 entries, the experience has been that when you sum up the quantum of this we received for photo, you have 138. And when you do for cartoons, we have 40. When you put the two together, being visual, the visual categories of the award, you find out that sums up to 178 of the 888, which means that the other categories, the print, the online, the broadcast, make up the 710 that remains. That means that, you know, when you compare 710 with 178, that's oceanic, you know, in terms of difference. For us, it gets us wondering that what happens to all of the photos, all of the editorial cartoons that are being churned out by media houses on daily basis. So why don't we have entries why don't we have sufficient entries that can actually match these other ones that are text-based? And of course, that also made us to dig deeper and wider with our media monitoring efforts. And we found out that perhaps it's a way of the cartoonists, the photojournalists, perhaps the cameramen, also trying to check themselves to see that, well, I doubt that this will meet the requirements that the Wole Soyinka Center requires of its award. And you know, evidences of those that came up in our media monitoring efforts shows that many of the stories were actually, many of the photos and cartoons were actually reactive, you know, rather than being proactive. Reactive in the sense that many of them are event-based. Recently, the president was at the United Nations General Assembly, and what we find cartoonists and all maybe publish would be stuffs around the event. The president was there and some of the speeches he made. But as to cartoons and photos that actually unravel, unearth certain issues. You find a dearth of that in newspaper reports, in print, and in online and all. Then we also found out that sometimes these photos and cartoons are rather used as fillers. So an editor is planning a page and notice that, well, we will not be able to fill the threshold of 32 pages we have. Then, it calls for a picture, maybe that has been done earlier, and then uses that to fill the pages. So is to also mention the fact that the award call for entries will be opening again next week, Wednesday, and we want to challenge photojournalists, cartoonists to put in for the entries, and let us see how investigative their work can be, because that's the crux of what we are rewarding. Now, in terms of what makes the round, I do know that we all would agree that in recent past, most of the stories that have made the rounds, that have become the talk of the town, have been, text-based stories, stories done online, stories in print, stories by broadcast reporters. And but what we have always known is that a picture is what more than 1,000 words. Of course, they say 1,000 words. So it means that a picture, an illustration, as with cartoons, has that capacity, has the potential to also do what these broadcast stories are doing. So it's a challenge, and as we've come for this summit, is to also call our attention to the fact that we should open our minds such that we are able to glean ideas as to what can make our photos, our cartoons, as investigative as it should be. So that speaks to why we are here today. We want to be able to help journalists, photojournalists, cartoonists, cameramen capture investigative images with their lenses and portray the same with their illustrations. And in doing that, also help them appreciate the techniques that are available with the digital revolution, so that they are able to disseminate their works and promote the same out there. And finally is to appreciate our panelists, which I know that they are up to the task, and for prioritizing this event, we appreciate them. And to everyone in the audience, I want to thank you for joining the conversation. It promises to be rich, to be robust, to be exciting. As such, I encourage you to follow the conversation through, engage with it across your social media platform, just like the compare had started with. I want to wish us all a fruitful conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Samson. I appreciate your remarks, keeping it short, simple, and to the point. Now, if you've joined us in the last few minutes, I want to welcome you once again. This is the Visual Realities Media Summit of the Wole Soyinka Center for Investigative Journalism. The 2023 edition of this summit looks at online space, access to information, and capturing social realities. I happen to have with me a panel of experts, professionals, in each of their own niches, right, within this field of photojournalism, journalism that essentially captures the eye. And we're going to dive into it very quickly. I want to start off with initial thoughts from our guests, and I'll start with you, Nelly. Nelly Atting, once again, is a freelance photographer and a doctoral student at Cardiff University in Wales. So you've got the floor. Looking at the theme for this year, and perhaps, just getting your initial thoughts on what comes to you when you're asked about your work.
Oh, when I was even doing a bit of reading about this, the first thing that came to my mind is how I myself, as a photographer who kind of moved from print journalism to photojournalism, have been documenting, and why I find some stories important and some stories not important. And the access of being able to self-publish online, I feel like all of those things kind of come in together. But again, and I'm also looking at the emerging photography scene and the industry from Africa, not just in Nigeria, because it's expanding, and even access as well for them in terms of self-publishing, in terms of also even having access to communities to to document. And even the evolving visual literacy now, people now tend to understand when they see a politician eating corn by the roadside during election period, they understand the difference that can be an image that is that has propagandic and rhetoric. And in the past, that was something that wasn't really, that kind of awareness wasn't really there. So it now even makes me as a photographer keep questioning, what does my access look like? What image am I focused on, or the meaning am I trying to create? What is the message as well? And who are these contents for? Because at the center of documentation, at the center of production is having the audience in mind. And also, I'm going to bring a bit of humor into this because I've also been extending my research away from photography, but looking at caricatures, looking at humors, looking at cartoons, and how that also plays a very huge role in our political sphere in Nigeria currently. And I realized that so much of what we laugh about is basically our innate experiences, what has shaped our society. And that humor is like a reflection that we can see vividly. And that has also been very fascinating, just digging into it. So basically, I'm hoping that this conversation will be rich, and I can also learn about especially what are these virtual, what do we tend to put on in virtually, and also even in-depthly looking at what kind of content are we focused on as audiences. Are we that level of awareness? How do we expand that? So thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you, Nelly, and we're excited to have you. Now, I want to turn to Godwin Nwachukwu, and just again, as a reminder, Mr. Nwachukwu is a professional cameraman with TVC Communications. Godwin, I mean, for one, you work in broadcast media. This is a visual, you work in television in particular. It's visual right off the bat. And in many ways, people don't think about those who are behind the camera, at least when you're thinking of your final audience. And when you look at this year's theme, it speaks to online space, right? It speaks to shared realities. And I wonder how much of a difference it has made when you think about shifting from traditional television in the way that we think about it and moving your work to an online space that is shared and can be accessed by anyone.
Okay, so sometimes when I pick my camera, I definitely know that a lot of people are going to watch my visuals. And, traditional media, you can actually know the number of people that are watching. But knowing fully well that these days, social media has come to stay. And each time I'm shooting, I have the back of my mind that I can't control the visuals, the reach of the visuals, because somebody can actually pick it, download the video, and send to another person, to another platform, and to another platform, and it continues to go that way. So it gave me joy that it's no longer the way it used to be before, where you shoot and you know the audience that you are actually going to reach. But at the end of the day, it's going to go viral, go to different countries. So it gives me joy, and I'm happy. And just like you feel more happy when you know that your job is going to get towards the end of the world. You feel more happy and feel more elected. And as a cameraman and somebody who is into investigative stories, you know that it's not always easy to recognize a cameraman. Each time award is being celebrated, each time people are given award, nobody think about the guy behind the camera. Nobody think about who did the job. They're always also interested in who is in front of camera, and which sometimes can be depressing and be challenging too, because you go into, as a man with camera, you are easily spotted in the crowd. If there's going to be any attack, you are the person that is prone to attack in the first place, because the person you are working with can go into the crowd and nobody will notice the person. But you holding your camera, you definitely know that as you're saying goodbye to your family in the morning, you might not come back in the evening. We have had cases of people who have gone out in the morning to do their job. At the end of the day, they come back, they couldn't make it back home. But yeah, I'm excited. The fact that everything is tilting towards social media now, but I still bear at the back of my mind that for the fact that we're not celebrated enough, the video journalists are not celebrated enough. That's one of the reasons I appreciate this avenue today. Well, As a television cameraman who has faced a lot of challenges, not only in Nigeria here, but outside the country, I want to share one experience that happened to me in Central African Republic. There was an issue of anti-Balaka and Seleka rebels fighting in Central African Republic. I think that was 2015. Yeah, there was no social media then. There was no social media. Yeah, there was social media, but not to the extent that we have it today. I was to go to a place called Bosongwa. Bosongwa is like a no-go area in Central African Republic. We want to go and do investigative journalism. And I went with my reporter. Of course, he was filing the report. I was editing and I was sending. But at the end of the day, even the challenges we face on the way when the United Nations told us that we might go and we might not be able to come back because of the attack, that we might be attacked there. We went with war jets, being the only journalist from Africa that went to that place. No other journalist was able to go because they were all afraid. But myself and my reporter, Femi Akonde, we went to the place. And there was no social media presence like this before. And the story was limited because we couldn't reach the level it's supposed to have gotten. By the end of the day, Femi was called, my reporter was called, and he was appreciated for doing that report. But the man behind the camera, behind the background, never got any mention. So it's always sometimes it could be depressing that nobody looked towards your side and said you have done so well. I also remember again a case that happened in Akwa Ibom here in Nigeria where set of guys snatched ballot paper. I think that was 2015 election, snatched ballot paper. And I was the only one that got that video of that ballot paper, snatching of ballot paper. I was the only one that got the video. And some guys came to me and they were asking me, did you get the video? Somewhere for, somewhere against. I don't know what to say. If I should say yes or if I should say no, because the other guys were saying, yes, he got it. The other one said, no, he didn't get it. I kept mute. The one that said I got it were beating me. The one that said I didn't get it were beating me too. And I was receiving that beating. The video went viral at that time. Everybody, there was no watermark. And some of the challenges still that your video could go viral. People can use your video from a point. Yeah, can use your people could use your video, but at the end of the day, there's no credit to you. There's nothing to say, okay, this has you have done so well.
You know, Godwin, I'm glad that you have highlighted these challenges, because you move from what are the physical dangers, but also just the dangers when it comes to your intellectual property within the space itself, how we overlook, once again, really behind the camera. Perhaps when you go out onto the field next time, it has to be the reporters who will wear the press so that, you know, you both have identifying markers. While you are holding your camera, they have the jacket with press on the back. But thank you for sharing your personal experiences with us, and we'll circle back to it in a moment. At this point, I want to invite Sodiq Adelakun. Mr. Adelakun is a multi-award-winning visual journalist with Channels Television. And you know, Sodiq, it's difficult to say whether your visual journalism is about thinking about the shot on a program where maybe it's a live feed, or if you're thinking about location, or if you're thinking from the eye of a video camera or still camera, whatever the case may be. So perhaps you will break that down for us a little better. And I don't know if Godwin has already kind of touched on some of your experiences, because I saw you smiling quite a bit when he was sharing some of the things he's gone through. So you've got the floor now.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. I mean, it's beautiful having a conversation like this with people who have great minds like this. I mean, if you look at our kind of work, considering the visual world we live in, recent transformation technologies has actually affected our works. So you being a visual journalist, you have to be more aware of the fact that your roles have increased as a visual person. So for me, working in Channels Television is not a surprise. So something I've actually put on my mind for a long while. Like, I want to learn different aspects and realms of journalism in Nigeria. So I've worked in newspaper organization like Punch newspaper. I've worked with international organization like AFP. And I'm currently working with Channels. All of these bring to mind the fact that you can always work in a multi-dimensional way. Sometimes it could even be the reporter, the photojournalist, video journalist, or even someone just giving an insight of what is happening wherever you are. So for me, it's all in one. That is why if you look at my record, I went through all these schools to learn about all these things so that I'm guided by the ethics of journalism, and I make sure that I'm employable to the organizations that are available in the sphere of my career. So being a photojournalist or a visual journalist in the world we live in is a potential risk because you are exposed to different kind of information, and you have to ask yourself, like, what really do you need to publish? What really matter, and why are you there? Because several times, many people who are Nigerian journalists have found themselves in deep problem because they could not ascertain what is important for them at that particular time. Some of them just carried away by the fact that they are journalists and they need to report for the organization. But most times you have to be self-aware of the information you are accessing. Information you're accessing is like a time bomb because you are the one seeing it, and transferring that information to another person can cause a lot of havoc. For example, for the security people, they might find the information very daunting to their image. And for you, that kind of information might be very informative to educate people and to make sure that they are aware of their surrounding. So that is where the idea of helping to tell the story responsibly coming into mind. So for a visual journalist, you just don't need to be someone who just capture visuals. You have to understand that upscaling your skills to necessary in delivering this thing. That is where the idea of open format comes into mind. Today, we don't really have open format journalism in Nigeria because, like Godwin stated earlier, he said he's a camera person. For me, I've learned to multitask, to report in terms of text, to report in terms of video, to report in terms of photos, and also to give data analysis and fact check my pictures and videos to make sure that it meets the standard of journalism globally. So and if you ask me what is this open format, it's just like you have you make use of videos, pictures, cartoons, or illustration like data to tell a story responsibly. So today you don't have the power to determine how much the impact of your story will go. So the best thing you can do is that to prepare the story in a very important way and in a very visually appealing way for your audience. And that is where you bring in the imagination of image processing, short videos, illustrations, and pictures into place. And you create it to an open format while being guided by the ethics of journalism. All of these put together will help tell your story better. I'll give an example. Myself and my colleagues worked on a story in the Niger Delta about the discovery of oil thieves and oil vandals in at Afroma near Esquabos. And we had to go into that zone, and with a team of a reporter, a team of a videographer, and a team of a drone operator. Now, all three of us can be substituted for one another. That means we can write, we can fly drone, and we can record. So in this situation, the boat can only take 2 persons, and myself and the reporter were on the boat to the platform where the oil was being stolen. I had to multitask. I climbed and videoed from the platform on the sea near the Atlantic Ocean. I used the drone and I used the camera. At the same time, I also use a tool called mapping tools because at that particular zone, you cannot access internet, but you want to help tell your story responsibly. So you have to use a kind of tool that shows the longitude and latitude of where you are, so that people who are not there can understand the depth and the kilometers where the oils that were being stolen from to where you are. So this kind of skills come to mind. You don't rush. You cannot rush a story. Once you rush the story, you have jeopardized the story you are telling. So when you are in a story setting, what you have to do is think, I'm the one here, I'm in charge. How can I help tell this story responsibly? So these are the things that comes to mind. So for me, these are the things I put into consideration when working with the team of journalists, because you cannot do it alone. You have to delegate. You have to say, okay, Olu, I'm going to do this, you do that. And that was how we were able to get good illustration to tell the stories. So in the setting today, we should be able to multitask so that we'll be able to work together in any setting we find ourselves, and we receive the credibility of the work we've done.
You know, Sadiq, you mentioned multitasking, and all I think is that you are essentially reiterating the mantra of the 21st century journalist. Once upon a time on radio in Nigeria, people's singular job was to be a duty continuity announcer. Oh, this is what's going on now. This is the next program coming up. So it's fascinating to hear how this multitasking, you know, it translates from now. Mustafa Bulama is a self-taught political cartoonist with Daily Trust newspaper, and I'm sure a few people on this platform have seen some of his work. I find cartoonists that work with political content interesting for a few reasons. Many of us here we grew up, you know, daddy had a newspaper, and the one thing you were looking for was the cartoon, the strip at the back or somewhere in the middle, wherever it was, whether you understood the context or not. And Mustafa, in this case, right, we've come to a reality where, again, being in this online space, a shared space, the access is very much available if you've got the right tools, makes that your work is more readily accessible. And it's accessible to every age group simply because of what the visuals happen to be. And I wonder how you think about your work in the context of all of this.
Okay, thank you very much and good morning. For me, you know, my journey as a political cartoonist wasn't something I actually planned. You know, like most artists, I grew up drawing things. I just draw whatever comes to mind or whatever I see and so on. But you know, just by chance, I ended up being a political cartoonist. You know, started working in 2008 as a political cartoonist. But the initial impression I had about political cartoons was, you know, just making maybe funny caricatures or funny drawings, you know, just make people laugh, and that's it. But you know, as I kept on learning on the job, I got to realize that it is much bigger than that. You know, as a political cartoonist, you are able to make commentary. You are able to express your opinion. You are able to critique the government. You are able to advocate for good governance and social justice and all of that. So I got to realize that this is a serious business, and I'm into something really, really important. Also, following what was happening in the world at that time, different cases of political cartoonists coming up with different cartoons that people talk about all over the world that has caused serious controversies and even violence, you know. So yeah, that really you know, put in me that I have a great responsibility, you know, and whatever it is I'm going to put out there, I am responsible for it. The thing about political cartoons is that, you know, you could sit down and write an article about something, and I can make a political cartoon about that same subject, you know, the same article, the same subject, but more people will read my cartoon, understand my cartoon, and not read your article. You know, few people will read your article, and so it has this reach, right? And then coming to the social media age and all of that, people see these things and they're informed, and it's so fun, it's colorful, it's all of that. So I see myself in a very important position. I think I will just say might be important position, and I try to use whatever I have, you know, to send the message out there. sometimes people may think cartoons are reactive, but it is so because we don't go out to investigate or create stories. Our materials come from the journalists, the reporters, right? So something has to be published. A story has to be out there. You know, it could be, in the news, maybe broadcast, wherever, print and so on. But there is that story. You can't just invent something and make a cartoon about it, because after all, you are giving out an opinion, but the opinion has to be on something that is happening. So it could be a general opinion, it could be an individual opinion. Sometimes when we search for our materials, the cartoons we actually create, sometimes they don't even come from us. You go on social media and people are talking about something, and then somebody says something hilarious, something really funny, and you say, "Hi, this needs to come up in a cartoon form," and so on, and bring it out. So but sometimes you have to sit down and you think about what to say about the situation or whatever issues happen. But the ultimate goal is you want to see kind of change, something positive. It could be the politics, economy, security, whatever it is that is affecting people.
Thank you, Mustafa, for sharing a really, really great insight into just what it is that informs your work. We're still going through our panelists, right? And up next is Titilope Fadare. Ms. Fadare is a media practitioner with Premium Times, and she happens to be one of the 2021 Report Women Fellows of the Wole Soyinka Center for Investigative Journalism. Now, Ms. Badari, I'm going to leave this theme open for you. You're a storyteller, right? So when you think about what we're discussing, online space, access to information, shared realities, what really comes to your mind?
Okay, for me, is the fact, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, so it's amazing, first of all, to hear different perspectives from the cartoonists to photojournalists to, photo videographers and the likes. I'm coming from a particularly unique perspective, which is the emerging trend of mobile journalism. So in 2020, I came across an advert organized by Facebook to train African journalists on mobile journalism. So for the first time, I was hearing there's something like this, but before that time, I was hoping to get, like, say, my camera, get a laptop that I'll be able to use, edit and all that. But at the time, I didn't have the money to do that. So when I saw the opportunity, I was like, okay, so let's see what's this about. And then the training lasted for like 6 months, went through several assignments and all that, and eventually emerged one of the winners of that particular training. And so that actually struck me in the sense that this is one aspect of journalism that is really new in Nigeria, because a lot of newsrooms, particularly online platforms and say print, they do not have access or the facility or resources to be able to afford like heavy equipment, heavy multimedia or sophisticated multimedia equipment. And so just making use of your mobile phone, you can achieve a lot and more with your mobile phone to, aid your editorial production. And so from there, from the training, I was able to, create like a package where I went around training journalists on how to make use of their mobile phone to capture, to edit, to produce, and to publish news content on their respective platforms. And interestingly, a lot of newsrooms also added it to their editorial policy, making sure that when their reporters are going out of the field, they return with what do you call it, with video materials that will accompany their written content. And even from like the series of trainings as well, a particular journalist also launched his own media platform. So basically what I'm trying to say is this: you do not necessarily no shades to the traditional media platforms anyways, but for those people who are trying to launch their own media platforms, or those people who do not have the necessary requirement or tools to make their work standard, I've been able to come in that capacity to train journalists, professional journalists, editors, interns, campus journalists, hundreds of them, to make use of their mobile phones to capture our social realities, and also be competitive alongside other newsrooms in the media space. So yes, that's the angle or the approach in which I don't want to talk too much, because that will spill into some of the things I intend to speak on. So
Yeah.
that's where I'll leave it at.
Thank you for that. Although I will call you out on behalf of Godwin and Sadiq, because you sound like someone who can just put her little phone in her pocket and they're thinking about cameras that are worth millions as they're moving about. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Titilope. I want to call on the one outlier on our panel. Kola Oluwadare is Deputy Director at SERAP, and he represents a very critical part of developing any democracy in the world, civil society. Mr. Oluwadare, there's something that Titilope mentioned about how much of this is a new field in Nigeria. If anything, when we think about what has been obtainable, it's more of, oh, you've got your videographer, because we have had television for a few decades now. But even their work is changing significantly. And I wonder how you've seen what they're doing, what visual realities do in terms of being able to hold government accountable over the last, say, 5 years.
Thank you very much. Even the legal framework that regulates access to information covers every of the practitioners that have been mentioned during this conversation. And I personally salute the courage of everyone, the media practitioners on this call. So when you look at the Section 39 of the Constitution, for instance, we talk of freedom of expression. Of course, expression can be anything from an inscription on a T-shirt, conversations we're having presently, to cartoonists, and social media have expanded that right to also be the digital spaces. So everyone on this call, and media practitioners, whether cartoonists, social, and even citizen journalists, would all fall within the context of those who play within the context of freedom of expression. And the legal framework will be the Constitution, the Freedom of Information Act, the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. And that would mean that these practitioners also would have to play within the principles outlined by this right. So when you look at Section 22 of the Constitution, for instance, it mentioned the press, it mentioned radio and television, and it says, if I can quote correctly, other agencies of the mass media. So that means that practically everyone that we've spoken about is covered, and that includes also citizen journalists. And the law says that they are free to uphold the government, the responsibility, and be accountable to the people. It means that the work they do is very important. And just for a bit of context, what Punch does, we've done that in SERAP. I think I have 2 or 3 cartoons of Punch that we framed and put in our offices. One is actually to my left, to the left of my video. They sometimes take the work that we do and they amplify it in a way. And I did get what was said by Samson earlier about that looking reactive. But much more importantly, it also amplifies, it widens the scope of discussions that are ongoing in the media space. And the bloodstained flag, Nigerian flag during the EndSARS, it's a lot. Just that visual now recalls and brings back people to what has happened. And then Aisha Yusufu's iconic pictures during the EndSARS too also speak volumes. And the rather infamous Charles Hebdo, so no one wants to talk about that, shows the power of these various players in the media space. And now they should also relate to those laws that govern those spaces. And if you look at Ahmed Bouazizi's image, it started the Arab Spring in 2010. So all this shows the importance of each of these media practitioners. But much more importantly, they should understand the purpose of the law how it protects them, and how they can further the cause of civil societies by the way they amplify the work that we do. So, for instance, the Freedom of Information Act that allows citizens to have access to information, it's something that also these media practitioners are promoting by the very work that they do. So I think it is very important, and I think that the nuances of journalism, as it were, is far much more expanding, and the definitions of these must be as expansive as possible to accommodate the realities of our present day life.
Thank you so much for that. So I would like to circle back through each one of our panelists for another few more minutes, right, to expand on the conversation a little more. But just before then, if you've joined us in the last few minutes, a big welcome to you. Thank you so much for joining the Visual Realities Media Summit of the Wole Soyinka Center for Investigative Journalism. Today, we're marking the UN International Day for Universal Access to Information. And the theme for our summit is online space, access to information, and capturing social realities. We've just heard from our series, our panelists. They've spoken to their unique and individual realities. Now, in circling back, I want to start with you, Kolaole. You know, I find it interesting. You've said quite a bit about the space, about how important it is. And in the last decade or so, we've seen a generation that's very much defined by what is seen, right? So perhaps, you know, as we cross the next 5 years, people like Godwin will not be overlooked for the work they're doing behind their cameras. But there was something Nelly said earlier about how sometimes even when you see a politician now buying a cob of maize, roast corn by the side of the road, you know that even they are aware of what visuals do to their political capital, you know, what they do in governance. And yet I think about the social media regulation bill, highly contentious, right? And I'm using this as if you like, an access point to the challenges that CSOs and media face when engaging with government. But I'm thinking specifically from that visual aspect, which is highly dependent on social media, on access to the internet. With the series of coups, there have been concerns around shutting down access to internet in countries willy-nilly. And I wonder how, you know, you come in terms of overcoming these challenges.
Thank you very much, Nabila. Access to information is very important to democracy and also to any kind of governance, good practice. And I think the politicians understand that so well, which is why when it's election time, campaign time, the same politician buying roasted corn at the side of the road, he wouldn't mind really, because they are in further the customer's campaign. If at that point he wants you to know he has one wife and 2 children, he's willing to share. But the study when he's in office, whereas the same access information that applied pre-election becomes a real issue when it comes to governance, disclosures in governance. So, and that is why it is very important that practitioners understand the legal basis of those rights and are able to work within those rights. That means, for instance, that the private life of a public officer becomes more important. When you forget, he or she is willing to share when he was looking for votes. Now, a sudden remembers he has the right to privacy. And again, this is perhaps a discussion around how those rights interflow and flow into each other. But much more importantly, public officers must be willing to understand and apply the principles of access to information. For instance, to give it some context, asset declaration forms of public officers, why can't it be in the public domain? And why can't we have this basic information that lets us know how things are run and how they are managed? And that means that cartoonists, videographers who make skits or make issues out of these things are also doing the work of media, as outlined in Section 22 of the Constitution. And speaking to the social media regulation, the reason why there's even a conversation, and it's global, by the way, is because public officers and government as a whole is, call it, scared of the power that social media has placed in the hands of the citizens to know, to see, and to regulate what is accessed per time, unlike the traditional media where the government has some sort of control with the use of the various statutory gatekeepers that exist within that space. But I do know that this is an ongoing conversation, and I do hope that the social media regulation bill will not go to the National Assembly.
Well, I certainly hope that number of people share and definitely requires more engagement. Thank you for your thoughts on that. Titilokbe, I want to bring you back into the conversation. And I would love for you to talk about some of the tools that you use in your storytelling, right? And how that itty bitty, the phone, and I'm just going to put my phone in the screen right here. You can see that I actually have, it fell. So I've got a crack in my screen. And I'm bringing it up just to highlight that even though you're using the small device, you still have to think about, the safety of what you're using to tell your story. So I'm curious about some of the tools that you use in being able to convey the depth of sometimes, you could be telling a very, I don't want to say a large story, but you're taking what is someone's lived experience and you're trying to convey that in the storytelling on your little mobile phone. So speak to us about that, right? The challenges in conveying that storytelling and the tools that you use.
All right. Thank you, Nabila. So one of the challenge that we face obviously is the space issue, because you understand that capturing videos it's heavy. You might record someone for like say 30 minutes, 1 hour, and depending on the capacity of the phone, it's you keep doing that consistently as a mobile journalist. The issue basically that you have is the issue of storage capacity on the phone. Another issue would be the quality of the phone as well. In as much as I do not discourage, I tell people to make use of whatever they have, but then we also need to understand that the way our digital revolution is taking place, people are becoming more visually appealing to things that are attractive to them. So when the quality of your visual content is not solid enough, it would put off an audience. That's another aspect. Then transferring of video content from one social media platform to the next social media platform, there is always, sometimes, not all the time, there could be a drop in quality. For instance, at a WhatsApp, there could be this sound lag where you would hear the mouth of the person speaking faster than the sound it's bringing out. So when you're moving from one app to the next app like that, there is always going to be that issue. You can't, in as much as technology has come to help us, at the same time, we cannot remove the fact that there will always be glitches, or there will always be, some interference. So I think that's basically the challenges. For the tools, basically, most important thing is your mobile phone. For people, for instance, I also train campus journalists, and I also have to understand that they might not have the financial resources to buy some mobile gadgets. So in the place of say using a tripod stand, I usually advise them to make use of their phones like this, holding it firmly like this instead of with one hand, and ensuring that they do not cover the speakers of their phone. And then in place of them not having a lapel mic, it's important that they take a video maybe with a medium shot and move a bit close to their source so that we can pick up the sound. But mostly for you to function well as a mobile journalist, you definitely need your lapel mic. It helps to boost the sound. There are let me see. There's one here. So okay, there's one here which you just connect to. I think a lot of us would have seen it, which you just attach to your mobile phone, and then there are some that come in two pieces or one piece. So you attach your mobile phone, attach yourself, and then the person you are interviewing. You also have your tripod stand to achieve stability with your shots. It could also be if you could also get a source of light. It could be a ring light, it could be a soft light, depending on whatever you want to use and whatever visual effect you want to achieve. So, but basically, just having your mobile phone, a lapel mic, and a tripod stand, that is all you have to do for capturing. Then for say editing on the phone, we have beautiful and sophisticated video mobile applications like CapCut, like InShot. I've actually even done a documentary. I've shot a documentary and edited a documentary on InShot before. It has, you know, a lot of features, the text, the graphics, and everything basically that you need. So I think that's basically it. Just having your mobile phone, having the right the many amazing mobile apps to use for your editing, having your tripod stand as well to help you achieve stability, and having a lapel mic. That is the starter kit basically for you to be a mobile journalist.
So Titilope, I should actually move on, but just before I do, I'm curious whether you struggle with, not struggle, but whether you've been confronted with the question of legitimacy based on your choice of equipment. And I ask this simply because, yes, there is a generation that understands that the mobile phone is quite powerful visually, but there's also a very dominant generation that still questions using your phone as opposed to using a camera that you can actually see and carry and feel, whatever the case may be. So have you been confronted with that, and how have you managed it?
I think I lost you at the beginning part of your question, but if I understand what you're trying to say, I think using a mobile phone or using a mobile phone for a long time, it's people feel more comfortable you interviewing them with a mobile phone than with a camera. When you say you want to do a vox pop, for instance, and then you come with something, I beg, oh, I'm shy, I know if you talk, something like that. But when it's a mobile phone, they feel like it's something I can easily relate with. It's something that I have, you get. So I feel more comfortable. And even when maybe say you are going for maybe an undercover reporting, if you are bringing out a camera, you are already subject to target. Do you understand? But if you are using a mobile phone, they might not necessarily know that you are doing a recording. So to a large extent, a mobile phone still helps you to cover up, or still helps you. When I'm going to do my investigations or special reports, in as much as we have like the cameras and everything in premium times, when I'm going to say traveling to another state, I don't carry those things because number one, you have to think of protecting the gadgets to make sure that it's in one piece. Sometimes you even need an assistant to help you with, carrying all of these things. So mobility and all that, I know you have to be jumping from one place to the other. But when you have just your mobile phone and your backpack, you're good to go with all your mobile equipment.
Thank you, Titilope. And I hear you in terms of mobility. I've had to carry a couple of tripods in my day. My shoulders have cried from day-long events on that. Thank you so much for sharing. Mustafa, I want to come back to you, right? I'm curious about how you navigate just how you want to convey a message, right? Because this is a cartoon. They're not characters that are moving. Sometimes you'll have a bubble, a text bubble. Other times you won't have a text bubble. And one would imagine that I'm looking at it and thinking one thing, but someone else is looking at it and thinking a different thing. So how do you navigate the possibility of your work being fully subjective?
Thank you very much. Usually, I don't have that at the back of my mind that I want the work to be fully subjective or for everyone to understand. Whenever I pick up the pen to make a cartoon, I know there are a lot of people that do not understand the cartoon. One key thing about understanding cartoons is knowing the context, knowing what the cartoon is all about, knowing maybe the characters in the cartoon. So if a person doesn't know this, you may not necessarily understand what the cartoon is all about. You may even have word bubble, make a comment, but what's the backstory? If a person doesn't know, he will not know what you're talking about. So when I make my cartoon, I know I'm targeting people that may know what is happening or the backstory. Sometimes I also try to give them a clue by putting maybe a news headline or something like that, and then with the cartoon. Like the cartoon I posted today, Senate confirms nomination of Yemi Cardoso as CBN governor. So I know the character. I've never drawn the new CBN governor. I'm sure a lot of people don't even know how he looks like yet. So people may know MFLA and all of that, but they don't know the new one, right? So just putting him there without this, headline, people may start thinking, who is this? What are you talking about? And stuff like that. So I had to put that headline to give people the context of what I'm talking about. And then there's this monster, a fat monster who is feeding on bad economic policy. It keeps growing. The monster is inflation. And he has this bottle and he's feeding on bad economic policy. So I have to tag the bottle as bad economic policy, tag the monster as inflation, and then, the person being suffocated under is the Nigerian. I have to do all this just to give people, put them in the context of what I'm trying to say. But there are some issues that I know a lot of people are talking about that, maybe when you just put out an illustration out there or a cartoon, you don't need to put all these commentaries, all these words for them to actually get it. So yeah, it depends on the issue and also who your target audience, are. And yeah, so that's how I go about navigating the whole thing.
Just before we move on, let's talk techniques and which ones you say prioritize when you want to tell a story. I mean, the one technique that sticks out for someone like you is just the ability to draw. Everybody's here with their lens and whatnot, but they're looking at you and thinking, okay, this guy obviously has something special. So in that ability to draw, what techniques do you typically think about first when you want to convey a message that will end up driving change, or at least that's the hope when you put it out in the public?
Yeah, I get that a lot. People think that it's more about the drawing, but it's not really about the drawing, but the ability to actually convey the message using the drawing. The drawing it's just like a tool, but I guess what I'm trying to say is I could use stick drawing, nothing sophisticated, just maybe around, dots and some lines, and still communicate the message. So it's not about how beautiful you're able to draw the characters, but how you are able to tell the story with, right? So, for example, here I'm thinking about inflation, and I try to use a metaphor, right? Like a monster, a fat monster, and I tag that fat monster as inflation. So you have to be able to think like that. So we use these things, just like in English, maybe when you're writing something, you use figures of speech and all of that, simile metaphors, you even use irony and all of that. So we use these things, to send the message. So first thing I do is I find the story, of course, and then I ask myself, okay, what's my view about this? How do I feel, about this story? Okay, I think something is not right here. Okay, so what do I want to say? Sometimes personally, I may not have something I want to say, but people are saying something, right? People are saying something. Okay, I may want to express what people are saying. So once I'm able to decide that, okay, this is what I want to say, then the question is, how do I illustrate this particular opinion? How do I illustrate it? I won't be there for the audience to ask me, what am I saying? Whatever I'm illustrating, the audience needs to just see it and understand. I don't have to be there to explain to them. So these are the key things I put in my mind before I start making a cartoon. It goes with maybe the arrangement, even the arrangement of the characters. Who do you put first? Who do you put on the left? Who do you put on the right? Who speaks first? Who responds? All these things, you put them so that when the reader sees it, he's able to move. His eyes able to move and understand the story you are trying to.
Thank you, Mustafa. Although, I mean, I will say that we still insist that it's a godlike feature that you've got there. You might say it's about the story, but we refuse to believe you. Thank you so much for sharing. I want to move to Sadiq. Sadiq, I'm curious about, you spoke of multitasking, right? And it's your lived experience, your experience on the job. But I'm curious about how much of that you had to learn while doing the job. Because my assumption is if you did study photojournalism, visual journalism, right, in school, it's the perception about our education across the board. It's outdated in many ways. So I'd like you to speak about how visual journalists can access training, what they need to focus on, what sort of platforms are available to them when they want to develop these multitasking skills, which you have become adept at.
Okay, thank you once again. Like I said, for every story that comes to mind, or for every story that I'm tasked to do, there's always the question of capability and skills. You cannot get employed for a job that you are not that you don't have the skill to execute that kind of assignment. You have to have the skills first before you can get assignment. So if you see journalists today that are not getting assignments, or because they are not getting projects and grants, it's because of their inability to upskill their skills to get all these knowledge that I'm talking about. And for me, one of those knowledge that people like visual journalists can get access to, one the WordPress Photo Foundation community and the African database of photojournalism. There are always opportunities on PICTA where journalists can get a grant or scholarship or fellowship to go and have understanding. But for me personally, I usually give myself a target every year. I must learn a new skill that can enhance my storytelling skills. And that is why last year we were asked to go into to do a story in the Niger Delta, and for you to access the platform of the Shell and the other oil platforms, you have to have a kind of requirements set by them. So you have to go to the school of Tolman to learn how to swim and to have a maritime certificate in oil and gas area. So I had to go and do that skill for learning how to deal with emergency. For example, if you're on a platform and the platform explodes, you have to learn how to escape on your own. All these things are not what they taught us in the School of Journalism. But you're on the story, a platform explodes, what do? Everybody's fighting for their life. So you have to think for yourself, how do I get out of the water without getting hurt and without hurting your fellow journalists that you've gone there to do the assignment. So these are the things that actually come to mind. It's a bit challenging, but it will always help you to tell the story better. So for visual journalists, knowing how to use artificial intelligence and mapping skills. Because, for example, like I said earlier, for example, you cannot be telling the story about a place in Niger Delta to someone who is in Canada, someone who have not been there. You have to find a simpler way to show it to the person so that the person can have a visual narration from the beginning of the story to the end. So all these mapping tools are things that I've learned online. There are always digital skills online where you learn mapping tools using digital, using your camera. You attach a camera with a mapping tool so that it tells you the accurate location of where you've recorded the video in case there's a need for verification that your video or pictures are real. All of these are things that visual journalists can train themselves and avail themselves the opportunity to learn from online. So that's what I try to do. And I hope that at the end of this platform, I'm able to share with as many journalists most of the links to gain this information and to help them get better in the field.
I mean, it would be nice if you can share how to swim as well, but probably not. And I will say that I find it a bit disheartening that some of the things you're saying you've had to do, we're laughing about it. It's amusing in the afterthought, but I can imagine that as you were going into it, really, that's what came to your mind, that this isn't what I was taught in school. When you talk about swimming, I think about that popular idea that we'll just pick you up and toss you into the river. And then, if you swim, you swim. Thank God for your life. But before I leave you, Sadiq, I'm curious about how you manage the ethics of journalism. Yes, it's a 101 when you're teaching any form of journalism, but because visual journalists are relegated in many ways in the mind of the audience, there are questions. Nobody really thinks that the photojournalist or the cameraman or whoever also has to deal with the ethics. So how do you manage that when you're working?
When I'm working, the first thing that comes to mind is that when this story gets out, I do not have the power to convince anyone that it is true. So the best thing I can do is to make sure that everything about the camera it's properly set so that I can have evidence to show that this particular story was done in certain context so that everybody can see. Because you only have power over what you can photograph or what you can video, but you do not have power over the interpretation of what you've done. So that is why I'm always guided by the principle of ethics of journalism that you have to help tell the story responsibly. I am a witness of an event. I do not have the power to tamper with any investigation or anything. But it doesn't really take away the fact that I have to also be responsible in the sense that, for example, today we have solution journalism where visual journalists do not only video or photograph events or use data analysis to simplify a story, but also to give a kind of informative and suggestive ideas to the solutions that the people who are in government can tap from. The pictures from the video or from the embodiment of the media work you've done, we've put on the social media space or on the broadcasting channels. So what I try to do is that I try to make sure that even if my pictures or videos happen to be an evidence in a court of law one day, I want to be sure that I've done justice to this visual. So I'm always guided by that, and I don't want to be someone who doesn't help tell the story responsibly. Because if you do not help tell the story responsibly, it could be your family one day who will be a victim of a fake narration.
Thank you, Sadiq. I appreciate you being candid with us on that. Before I move on to get thoughts from Godwin, just want to let you know that in a few minutes, we will be taking questions from the audience. You will see that there's a prompt in the chat already for questions, so you can start to put it up if you have anything on your mind. And if your question is targeted at a specific person, it would be great if you just name the person so that we can get them to respond to what you would like. Now, Godwin, I want to come back to you and discuss equipment. It's usually interesting to hear cameramen gather together and they're talking about, for instance, how their salary is this and the cost of the equipment that is in their hand is this, right? So big questions on how you manage the safety of your equipment in dangerous situations. You recounted an experience you had in Central Africa Republic. So maybe we'll take from there. How did you manage to make sure that your million naira, right, maybe multi-million naira camera or whatever the case may be was maybe safer than like your forehead or something?
Okay, thank you, Nabila. Sometimes some organization puts a lot of value to equipment, even more than your life. But as a cameraman too, you know that your equipment is, just like they say, as good as your last resort. If you go out for an assignment, whether volatile area or not, and you get attacked, the first thing that comes to mind is he alive? Yes. Second is, what of his equipment? Did he come back with his equipment? So bearing that in mind, you know that your first responsibility, because equipment is like your child, like your baby. So I've even had a case where I was attacked, my equipment was collected from me, but I ensure that I get to the root, to the end, to get my equipment. To the extent that I was even telling them that, okay, if you want to do anything to me, do anything but leave my equipment. They started laughing. This happened in Ogoni land, during the cleaning of Ogoni, when there was a campaign for cleaning of Ogoni land, and we went to Ogoni to go and film. Getting there, we never knew that some people some of the chiefs in Ogoni never wanted the cleaning of Ogoni. We never knew, but we went there with the mindset that they are happy that government is talking about cleaning of Ogoni, and not knowing that some of them don't want it, probably because they were benefiting something from there. I don't know. So I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes,
Okay, I'm having
apologies. We
interference.
seem to have someone whose mic is unmuted. We'll find that very quickly and just mute the person. But please go ahead. We can hear you.
Okay, so yeah, so having the mindset, the belief that everybody was going to be happy that cleaning of Ogoni was going to take place, we went there with our equipment. We went there with drone, went with a sophisticated camera, tripod, and lights, and even our laptops, with the mindset that it was going to be an easy place. There's nothing to hide. We came out with our equipment, flying drone. All of a sudden, the youth of the community gathered us, and they rounded us, and they were saying what we are doing, what are we doing? And the thick of the forest, they took us to an unknown place, and with our equipment and everything. At the end, one of them said, okay, let us go to the king's palace. We went to the king's palace. The person that traveled with me, he understood the language slightly. So that was when he now got to understand that they never wanted the cleaning of Ogoni as they were campaigning. They were all agitating, while some people, they don't want it to be clean at all. So they seized our equipment. I was so confused. I don't know how to go back to the office and say my equipment has been taken from me. Equipment is my child. I love my equipment. That was why when Titi was talking about using the phone, I was just smiling, because Titi are kind of people that will make our job look like it's all commerce affair, that anybody can do the job. Yeah, so your equipment is your child. Your equipment is everything to you. In Central African Republic, they were speaking French. They don't understand English. In fact, even another one that happened again was even in Guinea-Conakry, when Alpha Conde was the president of Guinea. We want to do a report, and when the markets, they were all saying that they don't want the president again anymore, that they want a new president. So we were doing a report, doing our voice pop, talking to people. We saw surveillance, military surveillance airplane pass. We never knew that they were targeting us. They were just looking at us. So within just 2-3 minutes, they rounded us. The military guy rounded us in, and we don't understand French. So we have a fixer, and we have an advanced fixer. The first fixer is from Liberia, who speaks English. The second one speaks Susu. And the person that we're talking to, the third person speaks French. So from English to Susu, from Susu to French. So when they arrested us with our equipment, how do you manage to begin to beg in your language? If you beg, that begging will have to go to the person that speaks Susu to translate to this person that this is what this person is talking about. This is begging. This is how I will not translate to the third person. Before the message gets to the final person, the message might have actually be diffused and diluted. So but knowing definitely well that my equipment is my key. They arrested us. They took us to one camp. Getting there, I couldn't see my equipment again, because the person carrying my equipment was different. The person dragging me and my colleague were different people. But getting to the place, I have to tell the person that understands English, the Liberia guy, I have to tell him that these guys are with my equipment.
My apologies, Godwin. Please, if you're on the platform, I implore you to please mute yourselves, all right, so that we can hear very clearly, especially as Godwin's story has elicited so many smiles from many of you. I can see you you're really into it. Godwin, please go ahead.
So getting to the camp, I just looked back. I couldn't see my equipment. I told the guy from Liberia that understand English that I couldn't see my equipment. He has to translate to Susu, from Susu to French again. So the thing was a long. I was having communication barrier, language barrier there. But what I just want is my equipment. Whichever way you bring it, you go about it, speaking and interpreting, getting my equipment. So when the other guy was talking about, he was telling him that I don't know what I've entered, the problem I've entered, that I went to the market for people to abuse the president. And I was I'm here talking about my equipment. I'm not even talking about my life. I told him, I said, yes, my equipment is very important to me, that I need my equipment. So when he saw the zeal and I placed in my equipment, it's okay that they should bring my equipment back to me. They brought out the equipment and a smile. I said, okay, I should play the video. I played the video from one translation to another again. So the process was too cumbersome for them. The next thing they did is, okay, that I should format it. But knowing fully well that I had two cards with me, immediately I saw them, I moved out the card that was in the camera, put it into my slim pocket, and put another card inside. When they came, I said, I didn't record anything. They were just trying to listen to their stories that we didn't do anything. They begin to call people that understand camera. They came, they look at my memory card, look at the inbuilt memory. They said I should bring out my laptop, what I have copied. I mean, so most the thing is that our equipment is more or less like us. My equipment, I can't take equipment out and come back and tell you a story that equipment has been taken away from me. So probably Titi can Titi's equipment can be taken away, and she might not feel it because he has to on his phone to her. But mine is very important to me. I must safeguard my equipment.
Thank you, Godwin. Titi, they're taking shots at you, and I can already see a question in the comments, so we're going to come back to you in a moment. Just prepare yourself. Yeah. Godwin, thank you so much. And also thank you for warning, like if there are young journalists here who don't have children yet, thank you for warning them that, you know, they've got a baby that's coming on their way. Nelly, we come to you last but not the least before we open up the floor. I'd like you to speak to us about underrepresented stories, right? And when I say that, I think about how much of a difference an underrepresented or an undertold story can be when you're talking about it visually and when you're talking about it in text form. Under the previous administration, especially with politics now and governance, one of the things we definitely saw quite a bit was how the president and the vice president, they had personal photographers who would tell a story with a shot. So even if people did not like the vice president or the president, they couldn't take away that they were engaging with a story simply because the cameraman or woman, I know it's Tolani Ali that was for the vice president, Bayo Mobori, I'm sorry, let me not murder his surname, but Bayo handled the president, right? And they typically put out shots that in many ways we can describe as iconic now. So these are stories that we typically would not be able to tell if it were text or even just vocally. These are in some ways, whether underrepresented or stories that can't be translated. So speak to us about that when you think about underrepresented communities where you can use the eyes, the camera, the lens, or a cartoon to tell.
That's a very interesting question. I would break that underrepresentation into two categories. There's a political aspect of it, and of course, there's the social aspect of it too. I call those people, those photographers that work for politicians, I term them as political photographers. But again, when you look at the kind of production or the kind of images they produce, it kind of makes the politician, it frames them in a certain light that tries to humanize them, and also bring to light elements that probably we as audience would not have known about their personal lives, about their private lives, and it brings it into the public. And a lot of those images you can also see are now used in campaigns. And I'll give an example. If you remember Buhari's first official campaign photographs that circulated, that photograph did a lot of social engineering. It did a lot of, in terms of changing our perception of who Buhari was, previous image of Buhari. That branding is it has gone very explosive to now see lots of young Nigerians who I know used to want to be documentary photographers or go into photojournalism, now see political photography as very lucrative. It's like having access to power. It's like being in the close corridors of power. And of course, you know how that works in Nigerian scene. It doesn't mean that there is no room or there is no space for people like that. And you can also see even with Obama's photographer, political photographer as well, where he became very popular post-Obama's administration. And you can even see even in the style that they use in telling the story, one of it for me that strikes is ethically, where do they draw the line between being materials for political propaganda, political engineering, and branding, and making just like a world grandiose in the image of a politician? Where do you draw the line versus that fact and that narrative that you're trying to push? So that's another kind of representation. And again, I think it seems underrepresented because we were not used to such level of exposure to politicians. So it's quite good. But at the other side, I'm also posing these questions to political photographers, that where do you draw the line ethically? Do you have certain values that limit certain representation of a politician? And if those values exist, I also would like to know what are those values. Now, in terms of photojournalists and myself as a self-taught photojournalist, as someone who had to learn on the field, but I wouldn't say practically I had the knowledge of print. So I brought that print experience and journalistic ethics into storytelling. And I remember my early days of documenting Boko Haram. That's in 2014, 2015. I remember not even understanding what exactly I was doing. But I knew that it was from lack of that being able to have access to Western media to keep saying, come to Yola, come to the Northeast and see what's happening. And I would get emails like, oh no, it's unsafe. We have to conduct risk assessment and all of that. And I just picked up my camera that I had then and I started photographing communities. Then at a point, I realized that I was onto something, documenting this story. And then I started paying attention. I've always loved creative storytelling. And I figured out that there were angles to understanding what was happening in the Northeast. It wasn't just about documenting the crisis or documenting after the aftermath of conflict. It was also about what stories were very important. I also paid attention to not just the crisis itself, but even the people, the women, the personal stories, the children that were affected, children who were displaced, children who were orphaned by crisis, and children who had no access to education. So there were levels that you could, dissect from these underrepresented or underreported stories and decide which angle would you particularly focus on. And I think as my work evolved and now coming into academia, I started paying attention to what I call intersections of conflict, started paying attention to even my archive as a photographer that covered from 2014 up to 2020. I also saw how evolving that story or evolving my work had become. I think one particular experience that stuck with me was going to Maiduguri, and there's something I always struggle with as a journalist. Whenever I hang out with mainstream, especially mainstream Nigerian journalists, they always just look at me like, who is this one? Or they will be like, oh, she doesn't know what she's doing. And I tend to just laugh because I get that perception. Maybe because of my hairstyle, I don't like a typical journalist. I don't talk like typical journalist. But then I'm very happy that I'm a woman, and I tend to use that access very, very well in gaining access to communities or being welcomed into homes or just being accepted. Because when I go into communities, I blend in very, very well. And I remember one time I was saying in Maiduguri, when I flew into Maiduguri, and at the airport, immigration stopped me and asked for my passport. For a weird reason, I tend to travel with my passport because I know that most Nigerians don't think I'm Nigerian. So I go with my passport, and that happened at the airport, and I was like, okay, here we go.
We've got someone whose mic is on mute. It's taking me a little while to find who it is. Right. So that is Shehu Osama. I don't know if you've just joined us or mistake me. All right, so we've sorted that out. Thank you. He was trying to distract me from telling you, Nelly, that maybe it's time for you to pack your bags back to Cameroon because, you're fronting as a Nigerian and we're not sure we can take it.
I'm Nigerian. And then I'm back to the story. So I went there, and that's because I saw a story on I think it was the New York Times that did a story on the boys of Bama who were in prison and the ones who were indoctrinated into Boko Haram. And I went to the camp and I interviewed this particular woman whose story was very, very interesting. A woman who had given up her daughter to marry a Boko Haram soldier. And I remember posting that thing online, I talked about it. I was like, this was very powerful. But for some reason, because I had journalistic background, her face was covered. And people kept saying, why is her face covered? I want to see her. This is awful of this mother that gave up her child to marry Boko Haram soldier. But if you know how precarious the situation is in the Northeast, you know that there are so many stories that are similar as that kind of story that I had produced. Then over time, I started paying attention. I said, this woman might be exposed to jungle justice if this story stayed online. So I took it out. Well, I think over time of just documenting, so you realize that even trying to tell underreported stories, you could even risk the lives of the people that you know, that you're telling these stories, and also understand that these stories are not your story. You know, you don't have a complete picture. You just have a fragment of people's lives. And so, like as Sadiq mentioned, you owe them that responsibility of care and also being ethical in your reporting. I think over time, I look back at my archive and I'm very proud of the work I did, but I'm also very proud that, you know, people trusted me enough to share that part of their story. So I'm hoping from this experience, just listening to everyone speak, and just to step a bit away from your questions. And I think as I'm seeing a lot of key players in the media scene on this platform, I want us to keep thinking, like, where do our stories really go? Because I think that's an aspect that hasn't been captured. Who are these audiences that we keep documenting for? And where do they end up? You know, where are they in their echo chambers? Because we keep talking about the online audience, but we forget that these days, social media make news filter from social media to offline, which is now being transported back to social media. So there's that hybrid, you know, struggle or cross-pollination between offline and online. So that's something I would really throw out to everyone to say, to really think about it, where do stories go? Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Nelly. Thank you so much. Now we're going to use the next few minutes just very quickly to take questions, right? I'm looking at 5 questions possibly, just so that we can get our panelists to respond to them very quickly, and then we can do a wrap up. Now, if you would like to ask your question directly, let's look at taking 2 questions where you can speak on your device. You can just use the raise hand feature. And I can see there's already one, Ajibola Amzat. Ajibola, can you hear me? Are you there? Unless your hand is up mistaken. Yes. Oh, fantastic. Ajibola, please just introduce yourself and then ask your question very briefly.
Thank you very much, Nabila. My name is Ajibola Hamzat, and I'm the African editor for Center for Collaborative Investigative Journalism. Thank you all for your thoughts on this subject. I would just like to find out from the panelists, what do you understand as the relationship that should exist between you and the subject of photography that you always photograph? And I ask that question because the idea of the porn pornography that we usually attribute to the Western photographers' work is also very prevalent among the African journalists. And I've heard many of you guys spoken so well about your craft today. So I would like to know what's your perceptions about the kind of relationship you think should exist between you and your subject.
So, Ajibola, because we don't have time, I'll implore you to direct it to one person in particular.
Oh, okay. I'm trying to...
Don't worry, the person won't think that they're your favorites. You can just pick anybody.
Okay, I'll just be Sadiq then. Sadiq, you can answer that.
All right, thank you so much. Sadiq, I'll give you the floor just very quickly in about 2 minutes. Let's see how you can respond to his question.
Yes, that's a very good question, Debola. Yes, I'll use the context of the story I did in 2021 to give a better explanation to what you've asked. In terms of relationship between you and what you photograph, the subject. At first, when you go into a kind of setting like that, the only thing that comes to mind is the assignment you are given. You want to get it done and get out of that zone. But at the same time, it's a kind of two-way story. I remembered when I won the 2021 World Press Photo Award, and I was being asked by the Prince of Netherlands that, do I still keep in touch with these people? And I didn't know that the impact of their own visuals have impacted the whole world. The whole world traveled all over, the picture traveled all over the whole world, and they wanted to know if they are aware that the picture have traveled all over the world and is being seen by several people. And I told him that yes, that even the community is a place that I have visited after that incident, and they are so happy. The woman, after regaining children who were kidnapped by Boko Haram, was so happy that exactly what I explained to her on the first day was exactly what happened, because I told her that I do not have the power to give you any assurance to what is going to happen to you at the moment. But I can assure you that this picture is going to go far and it's going to give justice to you. And that is exactly what happened. And for her, me coming back into that zone, actually put a smile on our face. Because you see, if we tell stories and we think about our gadgets and all of that a lot, no, we have changed the narrative. We have made it look as if it's our story. No, it's about them. Another angle I would like to add to that is that when I was in Netherlands during the exhibition, a white lady asked that how is she feeling when I was photographing her. Then I told her that before I photograph her, I had already struck a conversation between her, so she's very comfortable with me before I could even get that picture. You cannot photograph somebody who you don't know their problem. You can't just get there and start photographing. So, and for me to even get that picture, it was the last picture I took, because I cannot photograph what I do not understand. So after I had heard all her story, it was easier for me to use a story to tell the whole picture. So the answer is that the relationship between you and the subject you photograph should not be too cordial, but at the same time, it should be objective in the presentation, so that people can know what the story is about, not about you, but about them.
Thank you, Sadiq. Thank you so much. I want to go to Adeshola Ayoaderele. I see you've got a hand up in the chat. Are you here?
Yes, I am.
Oh, fantastic.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. I just want to respond to Sadiq and Godwin's statements about TT's equipment. I take exception to it because her equipment is as important to her as their own sophisticated equipment. Sadiq said that the way TT described the way she uses her equipment seemed to make the work an all-comer affair. No, and Godwin even took it a little bit, he said that...
Sorry, I wasn't the one who answered these questions. I wasn't the one. I didn't mention anything about TT, sorry. Yes,
somebody said that TT, the way TT described the use of her equipment made it to look like an all-commerce affair. Okay, if it wasn't you, sorry about that. But
it was actually in the comments. And Adeshola, let you complete your thoughts in a moment. Just to the panelists, I think if you've got the time, you can just scroll through the chats. You'll see some comments are there. Go ahead, Adeshola.
Yes, and then Godwin, when he was concluding, also said that if TT's equipment could be stolen, and I'm like, are you kidding? You know what I'm just saying is that she already explained that this equipment, you don't need sophisticated gadgets if you lack access to one before you could do your work. And from what she has said, she does have access to this equipment if need be. So when you come to spaces like this, please be mindful of the way you talk about others, because it's like talking down at her as if she's less, her job is less important than the job of those who have access to all this equipment. That's my submission.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think I need to
so much for submitting, and I'll allow you to respond because you were speaking directly to him. Godwin, please go ahead.
Okay, so it was on a later note, actually, when I made mention that my equipment is sophisticated, that if it's stolen, that I guide my equipment very well. I was just making, it was on a lighter note. It wasn't a serious thing, because I know how much people like Titi have actually pushed us. In the time past, whenever I want to break a story, we're always conscious of channel, not breaking it before us. But today, social media has made it that you, even as you are filming with sophisticated equipment, you must have your phone by your side to film too. The one that can go to social media, that can go to our web team, that they can post. So I was just making it on a lighter note. I wasn't serious about it when I said that her equipment might be taken away. She might not feel it, but my equipment is sophisticated. It was just a joke, not something serious, nothing attached to that.
Thank you.
All right. So let me go to Nelly. You've got a hand up, and while you are thinking of your contribution, there's a question here for you. This from Chris Babs, and Chris is asking, how do you think photography can affect political history and the fight against terrorism? So I'll let you come in, and then you respond to that question quickly.
Thank you. My first response would be to the conversation about the photographed and the photographer, like that level of relationship. And there's a statement that he made that was fascinating about even African photographers perpetuating the same Western narrative. And I want to first begin by asking a question: where does your imagination come from? For the longest, the representation of African bodies have been covered by Western photographers. Lots and lots of African photographers are now perpetuating the same narratives because that's what they have been exposed to. If you ask many African photographers who are even self-taught, who are your mentors? What kind of images are you seeing about yourself? They will point to at least 3 Western photographers. And if you go to their pages and see how they have perpetuated that particular narrative of African bodies, it's always the same. It's always the same. So, and I think that's where a lot of we are going into academia to try and do a lot of unthinking and do a lot of unlearning, and also trying to really find, if you ask a typical African photographer, what exactly is African visual language? It is hard to define, because we are all now, we now have Africans in diaspora who bring in a certain language of based on their experiences. And even the issue of identity is very diverse, that even to define a particular language that fits into African context and representation is hard. But again, I think the ultimate goal is that no matter what, even if you're just doing print writing or you're doing broadcast journalism and the rest, I think the level of ethics and care that you apply, you just know that how you want to be seen or how you want to be represented, you can't represent another person that way. So that's the level of compassion you bring into it. And there's something that Sadiq said, and I want to point out, when I go into the field, I've gone to the field before, where a lady was, this woman who was an IDP, she was very, very hungry, and I could see, and she was sick. And she then asked me if I could give her money to buy medication. I did not say no, I had the money on me, so I gave it to her. It wasn't about the picture, it's about the person. It's not about sometimes upholding ethics. And I always think that journalistic ethics are from Western ideals. They don't fit into our collectivity as Africans. We are very generous as Africans. We believe in community. We are not individualistic. So there are some certain ethics in journalism that I will not take into the field, as much as I know that those ethics exist. Because even when you ask me, journalism quite objective? No, it's not. It's not totally objective. When each media room has agenda setting, each media room has its own institutional practice and mandates that they follow through. So to some extent, there's some ethical practices that you are going to be blunt about. And lastly is that when we question where these images come from as well, there are those who also fly into places. And even as broadcast journalists, they do the same thing. So it's not limited to only photography. I think it's also basically, I keep saying, I talk about access. I know access is very important. Where does your access come from? How do you use your access? Do you know these communities very well? Are you keeping in touch with these communities? And don't forget, like, let's be honest, there's some certain level of access that is granted that becomes like a burden, where the communities expect as a journalist that you're going to bring change. And that's something that you have to overly communicate, that no, this work I'm doing, be honest about, it might not bring about change, but it might bring about awareness. And that alone that enables conversations. It enables questions to be raised. It enables you holding government more accountable, and it also enables your voice to be heard. So I thought
Nelly, there's one other question for you, which I want you to answer quickly before we get into a final question that's for Titi. I think there's 2 more questions, so let's see how we can get it very quickly. This is from John Ogunrinde. Ogunrinde. Yeah, I'm teaching myself my Yoruba tongue, so please bear with me. John is asking, Nelly, would you say professional coverage of grassroots has improved with the general access to smartphone tools? The old time excuse used to be lack of tools to go around in community coverage, because I want to believe it's sheer lack of interest, not lack of tools.
Thank you for that question. I think the level in terms of coverage of grassroots, I think there's still more work to be done. And there's also the role that we as visual artists can also impact in the community. I always think about this thing called participatory photography. I did a training recently where I brought people from the ethnic minorities here in Wales together to teach them about gaze. And it was very eye-opening to give them that power. I could have started just going to communities here and taking pictures, but I'm not from this part of the world. So I'm very, very cautious and careful that I don't want to misrepresent somebody. And you know how we always think that we are as Africans, we are all alike. No, our lived experiences, our social realities, our cultures are very, very distinctive. We are not all alike. Maybe just skin color, but not all alike. Even skin color, we're not all alike. So you can't clamp all of that together. And I think this is where this is where even leveraging NGOs, where these trainings are conducted in grassroots. These trainings are also, they also bring them on board to participate, to say what stories are you also particular about, and how can we help you tell these stories? I think it might also be lack of not even knowing that these grassroots exist and these needs exist. It's not just about tools, it's also the needs, and also not even trying at all. There's how we can live in a bubble and think this what we are doing might benefit a certain group of people without necessarily asking them, how would this benefit you, or how do I want, or what would you like me to do for you? Not the other way around. So I think it's first and foremost maybe trying from there. And because I know when I lived in Yola and I would go to communities, to work in communities, I would see children follow me around my camera. I think it's still like, if you're a photographer or if you're carrying camera, I think that's very common if you go to rural communities. You see children following you around with camera, trying to play with your camera. So I think there's that enthusiasm, but I think it's not knowing how to leverage or how to utilize or how to develop that level of interest. So I'm hoping that some of these conversations that we have today is also thinking within our this thing, CSO, what can we do, during corporate social responsibilities, or CSR, sorry, what can we do within as media organizations to support grassroots storytelling? Thank you.
Thank you, Nelly. And I'm so glad that you touched on this, simply because I know we're discussing shared realities, but I think we misunderstand just how much of our realities are different within just this territory called Nigeria. Too many people living something that you can never imagine. Thank you so much for your thoughts on that. Titi, this question's for you, and John comes back with another question. Just before I let you know what his question is, for everybody who's in attendance, I will ask you, because many of you have your cameras off. So please, if you've got very nice looking t-shirts, something, nice gaily on your heads, you may want to adjust it, because we're going to do a quick screenshot of attendance. So we would want you to turn on your cameras for that. This is, after all, a visual realities media summit. So let's see your fine faces. Now, Titi, John is asking, what do you think about journalism values being reduced to an all-comers content creation for the sake of likes, shares, and cheap celebrity on social media? He added on top of that question by asking, what's the quality feedback when we transfer mobile videos to TV broadcast? So Titi, I mean, you were the subject of what opened us into a fiery back and forth conversation. So you've got the floor.
All right. So yes. First of all, I need to just also acknowledge what Adeshola said, but I took it as a joke. It's not so serious. So going to your question, I think it goes into two categories. The first instance is the fact that we are seeing, based on the fact that the digital space is becoming more transformed, and we have moved beyond the period where media, the newsrooms are gatekeepers of news content. Now we have media consumers being having the ability to be able to publish their content by themselves. So the reason for mobile journalism is the fact that we as journalists already we already are equipped with the ethics. We know we have the ethics of journalism that guides our profession. So we already have that in mind. And then we also have the transformed digital space, which is the mobile phone. And so merging the two of them together, when, say, a media consumer goes out there to spread fake news by taking a particular video or picture without context, we can easily, make use of our mobile phones to access the place easily, and then refute or assert maybe refute or maybe also validate a claim that has been shared on social media platforms. So which was supposed to be a point I was supposed to make in my speech, but basically the fact that mobile journalism is coming into play is to also help with curbing the spread of fake news. So mobile journalism is just one aspect that has come, is serving as a solution to the fact that technology transforms, and of course it comes with the good side and the bad side, but then it has also come to, and due to the fact that fake news spreads really, really fast, is also an avenue for journalists to be able to respond, or to be able to fact check such news media content, visual content, as soon as possible with the advent of mobile journalism. But it also does not remove the fact that even as journalists, we have some media organizations who also sensationalize their content because of likes and shares, and being able to be in the eyes of people and all that. But it's also for us to continuously remind ourselves that this is the profession that we want, and we don't want it to die. And if we continue to compare ourselves to bloggers, then what is the essence of the profession that we're doing? So it's important that we also see ourselves as the what do you call it now? The upholders of the truth. We are the ones that people rely on. We are the authorities that people rely on for the truth. So it's important that we continuously put the right things out there. Then in relation to the second question, which is it's totally different, because when you're saving, so even if you're editing on Adobe Premiere Pro, there are formats in which they will say, okay, save in the format of a mobile phone, save in the format of whatever device you want to use. There is obviously going to be a difference with the quality. Well, I've not tested the latest iPhone, so I don't know how great the quality will be when you transfer such media, when you transfer the video output from say the latest iPhone to a TV. But to a large extent, if you're using an average mobile phone, the quality cannot be the same with a normal standard of sophisticated camera. So that is why there are different frame rates, there are different resolutions, there are different formats. Again, like I said, maybe with the latest new mobile gadgets, like say the iPhone 15 Pro Max, we might probably have something in relation to say a normal camera. But I don't have it yet. Maybe for someone who would eventually acquire it, there might be that the semblance to it when you copy, say, a video content that's been produced from that particular iPhone to say to being broadcast on CTV. So, and I think that would be my response to it.
Thank you, Titi. We've got one final question, and I'm only taking it because it was up there for quite a while. But Per, you still have not directed this to someone in particular, which is part of why I'm not sure who to send it to. So let me just read quickly. He's concerned about online media photography body that is seeking its own bill of recognition at the National Assembly. And his question is around a database for registered membership that would help in terms of protecting people's work from being stolen or sold without consent. And I'm not sure which of you can answer that, because here we're talking intellectual property, and many of you all your work falls under, the same amount of risk, if you like. Perhaps what I'll do is I will give this to Kolawole. We're talking CSOs and maybe some of the advocacy around protection of intellectual property.
Thank you very much, Nabila. I was minded to ask why me. But
because your camera is off, maybe that's why.
All
if you turn it on, it's too late.
As to having their own law body, really, I think we have too many regulations that is why in Nigeria, laws, legal frameworks that really are rarely implemented. But as to having their own body for the purposes of any kind of association, of course, Nigerians are free to register. It's all in line with the freedom of association. But to have a legal instrument that will regulate that again, really, it's just so unnecessary, really. And that's my own view. It doesn't necessarily need to regulate the practice. Like I said, the right to freedom of expression and the rules that guide defamation, libel, and all the likes would pertain to whether it's in the digital space or the real world. So it's all the same.
Thank you, Kolawole. I will say that if there are any more questions, this is why we talked about engaging with the hashtags. And if you go to W Shoyinka Center on X, right, you will find. I'm Can you hear me?
Very short one, observation, if possible.
I'm sorry, John. How about this? Let's come to a compromise. You can type up your observation in the chat, because I can see it's very active. There's a back and forth from just about the number of people who have been putting there. So, John, please, I implore your patience, right? Your understanding in the matter. A reminder of our hashtags: hashtag right to know, hashtag access to info, hashtag BR Media Summit. So you can use that to engage. Now, to my fine panelists, what I want to do is 1 minute across the board, because as it's going, we're definitely going to overshoot by 5 minutes. So 1 minute across the board in terms of final thoughts, what you want people to leave here, you know, thinking about. Mustafa, we'll start with you because I see you at the very top of my lineup.
Okay, thank you very much. I think my work as a political cartoonist, a lot of people in the past may think it's maybe something for fun or humor, but we're able to tell a lot of stories. In fact, we're able to bring out some issues and put them out there that maybe a reporter somewhere cannot easily put it out there. But we're able to put it out there without any problem because of the humor and the satire that is involved. But we're able to send a lot of message. So I think it's important for Nigerians to take editorial cartoonists more seriously. We have the Cartoonist Association of Nigeria, where we're putting together all the cartoonists, wherever you are, we come together, you know, try to help each other, promote the profession. And I think it's needed in a democratic setting like Nigeria. And we have a lot to contribute to the country.
Thank you, Mustafa. A reminder, Mustafa Bulama is a self-taught political cartoonist who works with Daily Trust newspaper. Godwin, you've got the floor. In a minute, what do you want everyone to walk away from here with? Godwin, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh,
Yes. Okay, so as a video journalist, I think I want everybody to understand how important and delicate the work of video journalists are, because just like we know that so many of our peers have died in the line of duty, until date, nothing has been done about that. I still remember the case of Eneche, who died in course of duty, worked with Channel Television up until 2012. And there's still Precious too, who died, I think, about 2019 or so. And so I think if it's possible, I will advocate that people in video journalism should be given more recognition, not about award, but there should be something like training, and training for them, most especially those that are into journalistic work, whether online, whether it's for television, and they should be given access to, I wouldn't say grants, but subsidized rate of equipment if they want to get equipment, where they can easily access some fund to get that, even if it's on loan, and create an avenue for video journalists to actually show their job, even as much as the reporters' work has been displayed. Let us have video journalists' work displayed too, and people can actually watch and say, oh, you did this work, you did this work. Not necessarily recognition per se, but it will give that sense of belonging for those that want to come into the business, because video journalists are being seen as the least people, but without video journalists, there's no television. You cannot tune to television and see any other thing except from video. The graphics you see there are just minor and very small. Thank you.
Thank you, Godwin. Thank you so much. Godwin Nwachukwu is a professional cameraman with TVC Communications. Protect your babies. That's what he's telling you. Sadiq, you've got the floor.
Okay, yes, I'd just like to reiterate again, like I said earlier, that the world is changing and we are being swamped by different visuals on social media and on TV. And today, you look at the world of journalism, I can assure you that even citizen journalism has taken hold of a whole lot of content in terms of broadcasting. You see someone who's at the right place at the right time using a mobile phone to record a breaking news or a story, and that will have prominency in the TV station or online. All we have to do as a person, as a visual journalist, is to continually retrain ourselves and to educate ourselves on the other open ideas of telling story, which is the open format. The research the story you want to do, look at the concept you can best use the story look at the concept you can use to tell the story and the tools you can use to tell the concept, and verify, fact check, and before publishing or exhibiting our works. Because I can tell you today that we have a lot of competitors who are the people who use the phone to photograph and publish online. That is why today you see so many fake news and fake images online. We should do better to help tell the story responsibly by educating and by training ourselves more to be better in our field. Thank you.
Thank you, Sadiq. Thank you so much. Sadiq Adelakun is a multi-award-winning visual journalist with Channels Television. Nelly, you've got the floor. In a minute, what do you want people to go away with?
Oh, there's a lot. And maybe I'll reduce that by saying there's always room for everybody. No one journalist is better than the other, and no one journalist is doing more important work than the other. We are all doing this work because we know the essence. We know that as watchdogs, our place in society is a huge threat to politicians and elements of miscreants in government and power. And there's a level of abuse of power now that is going on, and we can all see it's affecting all of us, even as journalists especially. So I don't want to think that one person's work is more important than the other, or one person's medium of this message is more important. I feel like we need all hands on deck. We are at the point where it's either we get silenced, as journalists, or completely what we'll be saying is just, propaganda and, what the government really wants to push out there. So I think this is where we need to come together and, keep doing what we are doing and share ideas, collaborate, share ideas. I'm not always hesitant to people reach out to me to say, how do you do this? And I also think like there's even a room now where with the whole Jackpot wave now, no one is telling the story of Nigerians in diaspora. It's a whole new bubble and a whole new ball game out here. And do not be afraid to push as journalists. Do not be afraid of where your work might be going to. But for every time you're producing, for every time you're thinking about use, you're thinking about function, you're thinking about where will these stories go to, you're thinking about even platforms to put this to, which is something we don't always think about as well, platforms. And even the seasons where we are, I think it's very important that we have all of this in mind, and I think it's just all hands on deck. The public sphere is very volatile at the moment. Like there's so much fake news. Even the fact checkers need to be fact checked at this point in time. So we need all hands on deck.
Thank you, Nelly. Thank you so much. And, a special shout out to your dad, Mr. Manny Atting, who's also here because you did note him when he came up earlier. Titi Lokbe, you've got the floor. In a minute, what's on your mind? What do we go away with?
All right. So I just want to reiterate the importance of the fact that Nigerian newsrooms need to, mainstream mobile journalism because it's a way to, capture our social realities in its realest and its stressed form. And it's also important that we see mobile journalism as a tool in fighting misinformation, which has been birthed from the downsides of media convergence and digital transformation. And it's also important that we as journalists, we hold the responsibility to harness the power of the mobile journalism for greater good and ensuring that our storytelling remains impactful, nuanced, and above all truthful. And just to also urge journalists to see that our smartphones are beyond just making phone calls or sending WhatsApp messages, but also being able to be a multi-journalist, basically multimedia journalist into one fold. So there's 1,000,001 things that you can do with just with your smartphone. So I think that's my 2 cents for this, and thank you so much for this event.
And by the way, just a reminder, Nelly Atting is a freelance photographer and doctoral student at the Cardiff University in Wales. And Titilope Fadare is a media practitioner with Premium Times, also happens to be a 2021 Report Women Fellow of the Wole Soyinka Center for Investigative Journalism. And now, final thought from Kolaole Oluwadare, the one outlier on our panel today. Kolaole, you've got the floor.
Thank you very much, Nabil. I think I've qualified as a videographer. I haven't spent time here.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
I would like to say that there needs to be a lot more intentionality in forming the strategic partnerships between civil society organizations like SERAP and the media practitioners. And the word media practitioner would include every practitioner in the sense from which we've had this discussion. I think the relationship between the two is best described as a symbiosis, amplifying each other's work, watching each other's backs, as it were, within the context of these of political officers or public officers who are less tolerant of criticism and who do not really want to be transparent and accountable. Thank you very much, Nabila.
Thank you, Kolaole. Kolaole Oluwadare is Deputy Director at the Socioeconomic Rights and Accountability Project, SERAP. And just before we get our final closing remarks, vote of thanks, please turn on your cameras. Would love to see your lovely faces. You have been with us in the last couple of hours, so it would be great to see your faces as we take a screenshot for just for feedback. I can see Manuela's face. I can see Precious's face. John, I saw your face from earlier, so, you know, a little wave to you. Juliana, thank you. I have Oluwadamilare. Yes, thank you. I want to encourage a few more of you to turn on your cameras. Need to see your lovely faces. And a big thank you in anticipation of you, you know, obliging us. Again, this is a visual reality summit, so, you know, we can't do this if we're not seeing something to work with. You could have the longest nose in this meeting, and at least it could be longer than mine, and I would like to see who's going to take that from me. Fantastic. All right, so I think this, and by the way, while this is going on, just at least if you decide you're going to be, if you're insistent that we're not going to see your faces, there's a link, right, just at the very bottom of the chat. You see Oge has put it up there. Please, it's an evaluation form, right? So you can fill that out. Thank you so much. It will inform the ability to have more of these conversations, and we can shape it accordingly. All right. Please, big smiles on your faces so that when you see the screenshot, you will not say that we decided not to, we decided to show a picture with you looking this way. Right. Okay, so I think the team has been able to do a thing or two. Fantastic. Thank you so much for your big smiles. Now, I'd like to invite, just to give us a vote of thanks, right? Afolabi Oni is Communications Officer at the Wole Soyinka
Hello, good afternoon once
Center for
again.
Investigative Journalism. He joins us to give closing remarks. Afolabi.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
All right. On behalf of the ED and then the CEO of the center, Motraya Alaka, I would want to say a very big thank you to all our resource persons. We want to say a very big thank you to all our participants, and also one of our biggest funder, MacArthur Foundation, for making this possible. So many lessons have been learned. Who spoke about the challenges of videographers, photojournalists on the field, and also the need for stakeholders to give them a platform for them to excel in terms of grants, subsidy for equipment, and also you know, for them to be able to improve themselves. We, at the center of this, our conversation was also the place of ethics, and also upholding truth and speaking truth to power. We know that we are not in competition with bloggers for likes and shares. We are to speak the truth and nothing but the truth. For photographers, for reporters, for videographers, it is in their place to present the truth the way they see it, and then present it the right way as best as possible, and leave the people to interpret. I miss the growing culture of literacy. I miss the growing culture of literacy amongst the people in Nigeria and also across Africa. The conversation continues on October 1st as we continue, or as we mark Nigeria at 63. This Twitter conversation will be about Nigeria at 63. What hope for media independence? Because, you know, at the center of everything that we do, media is very important. The currency on which democracy trades, it's media and its independence. Without the media, without a very free media, democracy can thrive. And then we can see that the civic space is, quote unquote, shrinking, you know, even despite the fact that we say we're in democracy, we still see people getting arrested, people getting whisked away to unknown locations for what they said or what they have failed to say. So as journalists, it is in our place to hold government accountable for their actions and also inactions. So the conversation continues on Sunday by 5 p.m. On Twitter as we speak to media independence in Nigeria at 63. On behalf of the management of the WSIJ and also all the board members and staff, we wish to say thank you so much for making it a date with us, and we hope to see you again on Sunday for a more robust conversation on Twitter. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Afolabi. And, you know, just as we wrap up, thank you, Titilope, Nelly, Sadiq, Godwin, Mustafa, Kolaole. Big thank you to each of you for sharing your experiences and your thoughts. And of course, every one of you who contributed to this conversation, thank you for giving this conversation space to have value, to have reason, to have impact. I will implore you, follow the Wale Soyinka Center across all social media platforms. You can find it Soyinka Center on all social media platforms. Thank you so much. My name is Nabila Osman. It's been a pleasure to spend these last couple of hours with you. I wish you the best of the day ahead. Goodbye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Daddy?